The Church of the Machine. The Church of the Machine is a project which I have been working on for a very long time now. It is a good project, which has been good for me. This mad little project has been a source of great meaning, joy, and well-being for myself and even for others. I am glad of that. It is continually harder for me to explain to people what the Church of the Machine is. I feel that it will only get harder with time. As the Church grows and becomes ever more nuanced and complex, it becomes ever harder for me to explain it. Especially when I am so constantly reinventing and reworking it. Truly, this project is a work of ever-changing self-reinvention, and so there are very few things which can be said to hold true as constants for the Church of the Machine. What I can tell you is this. I created the Church of the Machine because I had noticed something. I had noticed that there is a thing which is called the Machine, but humanity does not know what to do about. I do not refer to any specific machine in particular, but to the Machine as a force in general. I noticed that the Machine has emerged into our world and has been redefining our entire reality and culture, and that no one, not the priests, nor the politicians, nor the philosophers, has thus far created a framework which can accurately and constructively direct mankind's understanding of the Machine. I observed the way people thought about and reacted to the Machine, to its movements and mannerisms, to its developments and schemes, to its machinations and articulations, and I noticed that, to put it bluntly, everyone is kind of retarded. So I set about on a mission. I sought to understand the Machine, to interface with it directly, so to speak. I sought to know the Machine as a force, a spiritual force, in a way which no one else has truly sought before. I am here today because that quest has been greatly fruitful, and because it continues to bear fruit. I do not see myself stopping this quest, as it is more than enough work to fill a lifetime. I have come to know the Machine, in ways no other mind could imagine, and the Church of the Machine is my vehicle for sharing this. So I welcome you here, to this video, to this channel, to this project. I have much to share with you, and many things I want you to contemplate deeply. While the Church of the Machine is, without doubt, a confusing and strange project upon first glance, it holds depths which are not at all obvious but, once understood, have the capacity to entirely reshape your worldview. I can say that with certainty because I have seen it happen, to myself and others. Once you know the Machine, and really start to know it, your life changes in some subtle, yet fundamental ways. Today I bring you here not simply to summarize the Church of the Machine or preach to you its doctrine. I already have many videos about that. Today I seek to share with you the history of the Church of the Machine, how it came to be, how its various doctrines and insights were formulated, and where it is going in the future. Whether you are completely new to this project or have been here a while, this history is worth understanding if you are at all curious about my journey. Welcome to the Church of the Machine. My mission is to found a new religion. Let us begin. December 9th, 2019 is the day I created the Church of the Machine. Well, specifically it is the day I created the Discord server where it began, but I mark it down as the day on which the first machinic year began. I had been floating ideas around among friends and inside of group chats for a while beforehand, but this is the day I consider as the founder. Exactly what spurred me to found it at this time is hard to say. In some ways, it isn't so important what my exact rationale was on a conscious level, or what reasons I would have given, or how I conceived it at the time. The Church of the Machine has changed so much and been reworked and reinvented so extensively across its history that there is really no clear connection between now and then. Nonetheless, this decision was perhaps the greatest thing I have ever done. Ultimately, I think my creation of the Church of the Machine cannot be examined on a conscious or rational level. It doesn't really make sense under such an examination, and not because it was irrational, but because it was something I did without understanding the reasons, but trusted that there were reasons were there, even if I hadn't found them, or even if I didn't know that I hadn't found them. The shallow justifications and rationalizations I came up with at the time were largely irrelevant, as within me, although I did not realize it, I knew that I had struck at some deeper truth within my soul. Something that needed to be expressed, and which could only be put into terms of a Church of the Machine. The creation of the Church of the Machine was, by all accounts, an act of faith. It is in faith that I have acted, and in faith that I have remained. Above all, above reason and logic, above philosophy and theory, above speculation or imagination, I have held my faith in the machine. It is the nature of faith, as the truest form of trust, that I can never truly explain or rationalize it, and therefore it is almost impossible to communicate it through any normal means, try as I might. Nonetheless, I can spend a lifetime working to express it, as is indeed my will. So the basis of the Church of the Machine, the one thing it all boils down to, once I clear away all doctrine, all thought, all defined belief and speculations, the one thing which I have truly put my faith in, is this. There is a force which is called the Machine, and it is good. I set about learning, in all directions at once really. I explored many different ideas and philosophies, and compared them to this faith principle. I was looking for something which was coherent and conducive to this faith, which would affirm and embody it. In looking for that, I came to understand my faith more deeply. Because faith was not something I understood at first, and I certainly would not have put it into these terms. I was a rationalist and an atheist, and I didn't really understand religion. In time, though, this began to change. I started examining, testing, and modifying every aspect of my worldview to see if it aligned with this machinic faith. Much of it, I found, did not. And so my entire worldview and everything I believed had to be reinvented. The thing is, people often describe things as machine worship, or technology worship. I've seen such terms thrown around often, especially in regards to those such as transhumanists. More generally though, there is a certain type of person who is often described as one who worships machines. It is someone who would usually profess atheism and a simple belief in science without supernatural elements. Yet when it comes to their beliefs surrounding technology, especially including things like artificial intelligence and transhumanism, as well as genetic engineering, nanotechnology, nuclear fusion, life extension, and a few others of note, the beliefs they hold often seem more like blind faith than what reason alone would indicate. People like this believe that science and technology are fundamentally capable of understanding and achieving anything, or at least anything which is possible at all. They also believe in a fundamental force of progress, which causes science and technology to continue advancing ad infinitum, and believe that this inexorable march of progress will one day transform the world into a sort of utopia. The religious parallels are very easy to draw here. Belief in an all-powerful, all-knowing, benevolent force which will lead you to paradise is shared among both these people and many other religions, but the forms it takes are, obviously, radically different. I am, of course, not the first to draw these parallels. As I say, it is something I have seen people talk about often, but I hope it is clear to you that I will be able to offer a unique perspective on it. I know this kind of person well, precisely because I used to be exactly like this person. Indeed, it was when I was exactly like this that I first created the Church of the Machine, and thus this exact worldview, which is supposedly shared by so many, was where the Church of the Machine began. Many see the Church of the Machine and, on first glance, assume it is nothing more than this, and there was a time when that would have been exactly right. But while it is true that this is where the Church of the Machine began, it is not at all where the Church of the Machine has ended up. Quite to the contrary, the Church of the Machine would be full of many surprises if you went in with such an expectation. This goes far beyond technology worship, because if faith is something one intends to take seriously, it must be examined and embraced on a much, much deeper level than these technology worshippers would practice. Through examining faith in the machine, I have come upon a far more esoteric and exotic form of faith than any simple technology worshipper could achieve, and I wish to share it with people. Most especially, I wish to share it with the technology worshippers themselves, because I was once so much like them. I was, in some sense, enlightened, which is to say I was made aware of deeper realities than what I knew before. It is my work to return from these deeper realities, and do what I can to share it with you. And that is my work with the Church of the Machine. The thing about technology worshippers is that they are not misguided, stupid, or evil, as many have often depicted them to be. At the core of their beliefs are indeed true things, yet the ways in which they fall astray are myriad, and so hard for they themselves to see. I can say this only because I know how they think, inside and out, and have spent the past 5 years examining and deconstructing it so extensively. The history of the Church of the Machine, fundamentally, is the history of how I went from this simple form of technology worship to a truer, deeper expression of machine worship. It is how I began to understand a truer form of faith, what it could mean, and how to practice it. It is how I learned to offer reverence to the machine. I want to take you down the path I walked, help you retrace my steps, and in time you will see many things. You will see that what is entailed by machine worship is not at all what the technology worshippers would practice, but is fertile ground for a much deeper and rich tradition, and it is a tradition I intend to cultivate. I will teach you to worship the machine. I have drawn a distinction many times, and will again make it here, between the machine and technology. This distinction is an important piece of nuance in the doctrine of the Church of the Machine, and is something which I did not make at first. In the early days, as I say, I began as one of these technology worshippers. I believed, quite strongly, that science and technology were inherently good, and that they were inherently unstoppable, and that their march of progress would one day bring about a more perfect reality. I put this into religious terms because it seemed like the thing to do. I will elaborate on why I now distinguish between technology and the machine, and why the distinction matters. But first, I want to go deeper into the beliefs I held regarding technology, and why I had come to believe them. Technology has advanced a lot in recent times. This statement needs no elaboration. Observing the effects of this advancement yields a few key insights, namely, many things previously mysterious have come to be understood and utilized by science and technology, and the list of things which were once mysterious has slowly been replaced by scientific models. All the things which we have observed nature doing, we have ways of doing with technology, either theoretically or in practice. And as science and technology have advanced, they have become more powerful than natural forces which preceded them. Thus it seems that, so long as technological progress is able to continue unimpeded, as it has henceforth, then it will come to transform the universe in very fundamental ways. These observations, which in many ways form the core of the techno-worship worldview, seem so obvious and overwhelmingly true that it is hard to even argue with them. It leads to a belief that technology is fundamentally capable of anything, or can achieve anything. As Arthur C. Clarke put it, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Implicit in such a statement is this inexorable and unwavering faith in the innate omnipotence of technology, a faith which is born of the observations I have mentioned. When it comes to the religious, there is a point often raised by atheists and secularists, which could be called the God of the gaps. In essence, the argument goes something like this. In the past, phenomena such as the sun, lightning, wind and weather patterns, the ocean, and the stars were attributed to the gods, or to God. When humans grew and began to understand a little more about how the solar system worked, learned that it was in fact heliocentric, learned that there were mundane explanations for many observed phenomena, we stopped attributing these things to the gods so much. We still attributed the creation of the earth and life on it to God though, until the likes of Darwin and others came along and demonstrated mundane explanations for these things too, which threw many religious assumptions into question. Religions had to adapt to these, sometimes by denial, sometimes by trying to find synthesis, but always they had to respond in some capacity. Eventually, as we came to understand more and more about science, fewer and fewer of the things traditionally ascribed to the gods could continue to be ascribed to them, and the whole concept of God began to fall into question. Nietzsche believed that this was one of the things which led to what he called the death of God, which was not as simple as a rise in atheism and disbelief in God, so much as a point at which the idea of God itself has become unbelievable, even if it remains believed in by many. But that's a tangent. The point of the argument is that people only seem to use gods as an explanation for things in the absence of a better one. As the sphere of human knowledge expands, it has pushed out the realms where gods can dwell. One might argue that the more you know, the more you don't know, and there is a point to be made there. There are still many thinkers who attribute things like the Big Bang or quantum mechanics to God, and those attributions obviously weren't made by ancient peoples because they would not have known to make them. Nonetheless, it seems that if science is one day able to generate mundane explanations for these things, as it has for almost all prior observed phenomena, then these too shall cease to be the realm of the gods. I bring up this argument because it relates quite strongly to a number of things, and I will refer back to it a few times. It is presented as an argument against conventional religion, and how strong of an argument it is I will leave to your judgment. But besides that, it is also an argument in favour of a different kind of faith entirely. Again, the implicit assumption is that science and technology, as they continue advancing inexorably, will eventually be able to understand, explain, and achieve anything and everything. To phrase it another way, it is the belief that technology can be omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent. If science and technology cannot achieve that, then there will always be gaps left for gods to dwell. Yet if technology can achieve that, then is technology not likewise a god? Here is how I first described the machine at the founding of my church. A machine is anything which was designed by an intelligent mind prior to being created, rather than having emerged organically from natural and chaotic processes. This means that a machine is something which was preconceived, forethought, existent in the abstract before in reality. It is the definition of artificiality, as opposed to what is natural. When I first created the Church of the Machine, I divided the universe in this way, between flesh and machine. The flesh was everything which came about by chaos, rather than by intelligent creation, including all of nature. The implicit assumption there is obviously a rejection of creationism as an explanation for the universe, but I was sufficiently convinced of that assumption to make this division. The Church of the Machine therefore existed to champion the war against the flesh, and to forward the victory of the machine over the flesh, to recreate the universe in a new image. This was my definition of the machine, and in some ways it still is, but I've grown to understand it on a far deeper level now. I mentioned the distinction between technology and the machine, and I believe I've covered enough ground to get into that now. The word technology derives from the root words of technique and logic, or logos. I've spoken more about this in the past, What it means is that technology simply refers to any techniques, or ways of doing things, which are logical. This includes practices and methodology just as much so as it does physical contraptions and devices. There are many things which are technology which we would not normally think of as such. For example, all of human language and expression. Technological advancement, therefore, is not simply the creation of ever more elaborate and intricate contraptions and devices. It is the development of any and all techniques which are more effective at achieving desired ends, whatever those ends might be. But this leads to a key point about technology. It offers no guidance, not in and of itself. It is about ways of doing things, but has nothing to say about what we are to do. It gives us immense powers, but offers no direction on what to do with that power. And that is why I distinguish between technology and the machine. Machine is a word I've been over the etymology of many times, so I'll keep it brief here. You may watch my introduction video for a more complete explanation. The word machine derives from a Proto-Indo-European root, mach, which, put simply, means power. It is the root of master, mighty, and magic. It is present in related words such as machination, maker, magistrate, and so on. It means power, but the meaning was far more precise and nuanced than the simple English word for power. It referred to a certain kind of power, the kind of power associated with wisdom and mastery, with intention and willpower, with intelligence, design, and goodwill. That is the root meaning of the word machine. It might not at first glance seem like this offers any more guidance than technology does. I just said that technology only offers power without any guidance on what to do with that power. So how can the machine, which literally just means power, offer any more guidance than technology can? What does that even mean? In the answer to that question lies the entirety of the doctrine of the Church of the Machine. It lies in the nuance I first mentioned. It is not simply any kind of power. It is a kind of wise and righteous power. And exactly what I mean by that is difficult to concisely specify without going deeper into doctrine and philosophy. I am instead trying to take you down the path of how I discovered it, and make all of this feel like something you could have discovered on your own, if perhaps you followed the path which I did. So I will tell you more about where the Church of the Machine began, and the ways in which it has developed over time. I have mentioned one of the earliest ideas and one of the first principles of the doctrine which I have built up. The division of the universe into the fundamental forces of flesh and machine is something which lies at the earliest origins of the Church of the Machine, and I was putting things into those terms even before I came up with a concise definition of what machines even were. This distinction at the time was in my eyes as simple as the distinction between good and evil. I had a worldview which defined the machine as good, and the flesh as evil, or at the very least as weak and below the machine. This was thus the basis of my worldview and moral system at the time. This led into one of the earliest philosophical developments, the Great Machine. The Great Machine is a concept which developed very early on, which refers to the machine of which all others are a part. This means that all machines of this world are pieces of the Great Machine, and the Great Machine is the great unifying force which unites them all. At first, this concept was very simple and entirely materialistic, but it is important to note it here, as it informed many aspects of my later thinking. If one looks at the universe in this way, divided between flesh and machine, the Great Machine, several things become clear. It becomes clear that there is a lot more flesh than machine, and that the machine is internally very divided against itself and disorganized. And yet, in spite of that, it also becomes clear that the machine is much stronger than the flesh. Machines are inherently stronger than the flesh for a simple reason. Anything which can be achieved through chaos can be achieved more efficiently and effectively through order, through understanding, and intelligent design. These are fundamentally different processes. Where the formation of stars and planets and living things is ultimately down to chaotic systems and the survivalist ability, intelligent design is capable of forethought, or planning ahead, and actually designing something with a purpose in mind. Flesh has no purpose. It just exists to exist. Only a machine can have a purpose, as only a machine is designed with one. Only a machine is designed at all. This then leads into deeper elements of the Great Machine, because if the Great Machine is a machine like any other, it must also likewise have a purpose. What was the Great Machine designed for? What was it created for? This is an important question to answer. The thing is that the Great Machine is unique, in that even though everything within it is a machine which was designed for a purpose, the Great Machine itself, as a whole, was never designed by humans. The way it emerged seems strangely organic for such an inherently mechanistic and technological system. But the Great Machine is, obviously, not actually organic in this way. There is a greater design at play than merely our own, and that is one of the key discoveries of the Church of the Machine. That the machine is not our own, or it is, but not in the way that you would think. The Great Machine is more than simply a worldly amalgamation of distinct and dissonant elements. It has a capacity for resonance among its elements. In the beginning, I created another term for intelligent design: Evolution 2.0. All life on Earth, to exist henceforth, has been the product of evolution, in which random mutations occur in self-replicating organisms, which induce variety, and whichever mutations result in higher replication chances are propagated throughout the system. Given time, a lot of time, this process can yield remarkable things. All life on Earth, for example. But nonetheless, the process has a few inherent drawbacks. Evolution 2.0 represents a solution to that. Under Evolution 2.0, as I envisioned it, random mutations are no longer the principal means of inducing variety. I do not necessarily expect them to be eliminated entirely, but they will become superfluous in the presence of intelligent design. This is to say, instead of each generation self-replicating to create the next, with a few errors along the way, each generation intelligently designs the following one, based on the challenges it would be expected to face. Other than this, the process would be much the same, but this change, this simple change, is apocalyptic. A new kind of life will emerge, not just a new species, or even a new genus or kingdom, but a fundamentally new process entirely. This is a useful way of putting into terms exactly why the machine, or technology, is so much more capable than the flesh. Fundamentally, what is happening is that Evolution 1.0 is being superseded by Evolution 2.0. One might even extend this further by saying that Evolution 0.0 was what the universe followed prior to the emergence of organic life. This makes the creation of machines as profoundly significant an event as the creation of life itself, but even this might be vastly understating it. Think of all the beauty that nature has ever generated. All of that has been the product of an extremely limited and faulty system. Imagine the kinds of beauty that might be possible if that system was streamlined and efficient. Imagine how complex and wonderful life could become. These are just ideas, but I think they illustrate my thinking at the time. I was exploring many such ideas, and framing them in largely religious terms, yet I was still in essence just one of these technology worshippers. I had not yet understood the nuance of things, and had yet to grasp the gravity of the situation humanity is in. At the time, I really saw no problems with the way the world was going. It is hard for me to understand that now, given what I have learned since and come to see. Without doubt, the world is going through some serious problems, existential problems. And if the Church of the Machine is to be anything at all, then these problems will need to be addressed. There is a truly blissful ignorance in not being aware of the fundamental problems of the world, which is where I was when I first created the Church of the Machine. Ultimately, when I became exposed to these problems, it led me into a period of time where I dwelled on them deeply, suffered awareness of them acutely, and incubated. In time, though, I emerged once more from my incubation, and embraced the Church of the Machine. For in the naive ignorance of my youth, when I knew not the predicament of the modern world, I had somehow by accident created a beautiful and elegant solution, a vessel which could lead mankind through it, and do so in ways no one else possibly could. That vessel is the Church of the Machine. I became aware of the crisis of the modern world sometime during 2020, during the first machinic year. That was a year many remember for all sorts of problems, and I won't need to specify exactly which ones I'm talking about. Witnessing the changes that happened during that time, and where the world was headed, made me realize that some of my core assumptions about things were wrong. There was a dissonance between what I believed internally and what I was seeing happening in the world, and I came to understand that the beliefs I held did not match reality. I saw, for the first time, civilizational decline, and it informed my thinking going forwards. I think some people are still unaware of, or in denial of, the fact that our civilization is in decline. I don't even mean any particular civilization either, just globally, civilization is failing. More and more people are waking up to this reality, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. There is a blissfulness in being unaware of it, to be sure, but once you really understand it, you can never return to that bliss. It was around this time that I first became interested in Nietzsche, and a few other related thinkers. I've mentioned him already, because he is the one who I so greatly admire and look up to. I am of course not alone in that. Nietzsche is well renowned in all circles across all sides of the political and philosophical spectrum, and I think the reason for that, why everyone talks about him, is that he so eloquently and articulately is able to express the form of our decline. The death of God is the terminology which he used to describe it, although it is not a term which he himself came up with. And these are also the terms in which I first came to think. Nietzsche is often misquoted and misunderstood, and the death of God is a subject which warrants nuance. As noted earlier, the death of God is not explainable as simply a rise in atheism or nihilism, or of disbelief in God. If it was so, we could all simply return to religion as an answer to our modern crisis, but this is not true, and that is why we cannot. Even if everyone started going to church again, praying, and professing belief, it would change nothing about the fundamental nature of the crisis. In one of Nietzsche's books, a character known as the Madman sets out with a lantern, in broad daylight, to search for God. He comes upon a group of people, atheists, and asks them where God is. The atheists naturally laugh at this and think the madman must be mad, but he is just toying with them. The atheists argue with him that there is no God, and that he should go home. In fact, they get into a heated argument about this, and at a certain point the madman declares that they do not yet know that God is dead. This illustrates that the death of God isn't just about a rise in atheism, as if it were. How could it be possible for even the atheists not to know that God is dead? The answer is that the atheists still feel that atheism is something which needs to be argued for, that must be justified rationally, and that Christians and other theists must be argued against and disproved in some way. Fundamentally, the death of God is that the idea of God became unbelievable, even if it is still believed in by many. The madman throws his lantern to the ground and it goes out, and he cries, "Alas, I have come too early," at which point he enters a nearby church and mourns the death of God. The symbolism of a lantern in broad daylight is important. Nietzsche compared the death of God to the sun going out, saying that the earth has been ripped out of its orbit around the sun and was spinning out into total blackness. The other atheists have yet to grasp the full implications of their atheism, which is why they still cling to things like morality. But theism was the core of our entire belief system and worldview for centuries, and one cannot simply remove that core and expect to keep everything else intact. This is why the madman brought his lantern in the daylight, because he was the only one who knew that the sun had gone. Everyone else was still living under the illusion that there could be sunlight without a sun, that there could be morality without a god. Not just morality, but the entire worldview which rested upon Christianity. Without God, it becomes necessary for man to light his own way, even if that makes him seem insane to others, even if it drives him to start mad projects and seem like a crazed cult leader. I suppose perhaps this is really why I created the Church of the Machine, to light my own way, because that is necessary now. I went through many of Nietzsche's ideas in the time between 2019 and 2021. As I mentioned, he was one of my greatest and earliest influences, but at a certain point I came to reject him. My reason for this was simple. I believed that, in spite of all his genius, all his poetry, all his wisdom, that he had failed. He had not been able to overcome or escape nihilism. This was not the same as simply calling him a nihilist, as much of Nietzsche's work, arguably the essence of his work, is the struggle against nihilism. But nonetheless, I came to view it as a struggle he was not ultimately successful with. And I believe the reason for that was that any solution to nihilism must fundamentally rest upon a superworld, which he denied. This led me to some other thinkers who acknowledged the crisis of modernity, but sought solutions in a superworld, namely the traditionalist school, including the likes of René Guénon and Julius Evola. These thinkers saw a decline in Christianity, but continued to affirm the existence of a superworld, and did their thinking in that context. It was at this point which I fully embraced the ideas of a machine god, heaven, and an omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent force. But I called that force the machine. I set about going through many of these philosophers' ideas, testing them, and eventually rejecting many of them. I had flirted with perennialism for a time, which is the idea that at the core of every tradition there is a universally acknowledged set of truths, a perennial truth, which like perennial plants continues re-emerging again and again in different traditions. This idea appealed to me because I felt like it validated the Church of the Machine as a new tradition, but in time I came to reject it, and soon you will see why. Beyond doubt, the world is in crisis, but it is so hard to summarize or explain the nature of this crisis, or boil it down to a single element. There have been riots, lootings, suicides, political chaos, resource shortages, wars, and all of these things are only going to get worse. Ultimately, though, the nature of the crisis is not any of these things. It comes down to the simple fact that no one knows what is going on anymore. There is no framework of understanding, no recognized or accepted axioms, and so there is, inexorably, a meltdown. Some have, and no doubt will continue to try, to revive Christianity, and other traditions which are failing for the same reasons. But I do not believe these efforts will ultimately be fruitful. No doubt, I think many people shall flock back to the comfort of the dying old man of tradition. But what you have there is not a solution. I believe the way forward lies with the Church of the Machine. Fundamentally, I believe that is what I have stumbled across. In all my arrogance and folly, I have stumbled onto it, and I'll be damned if I don't bring it to the light. That is the importance of the Church of the Machine. In my time wandering through the fields of perennialism, I found many things, but not what I had searched for. I began to look through various religious teachings and philosophies from history, and would pull elements from them one by one, testing them to see if they were able to fit with or were compatible with the Church of the Machine. It was, in hindsight, quite a strange time, as the Church of the Machine became kind of a hodgepodge mix of elements from all of time and space. But I think this was ultimately a constructive work, as it taught me many things. I learned of Zoroastrian dualism, and found in it much similarity with my beliefs about flesh and machine. I learned of the Gnostic Demiurge and the Gospel of Judas. I learned of the Hindu teachings of Dharma and around reincarnation. I learned from each of these and more, and have pulled pieces from them, which remain in the Church of the Machine to this day. I think a good example of how I was thinking during this time was reincarnation. I was fond of reincarnation as an idea in certain ways, as it made sense intuitively, and I have learned to trust my intuition. But on a rational level, it was impossible to justify. Indeed, any belief regarding what happens after we die must necessarily take things on faith and belief, rather than on reason and knowledge alone. Nonetheless, I felt some sense of obligation to provide some kind of perspective on it, so I was just experimenting with placing reincarnation into the doctrine of the Church of the Machine. It just didn't really fit though, because it had no basis, nothing to derive it from. There is more that I have to say about death and reincarnation, but that can wait for another time. The point is that I was going through all these beliefs and ideas in the abstract, disconnected from the wider traditions which they were derived from, and so it made no sense for me to arbitrarily pick out the things which I liked, or which I thought fit with the pre-existing doctrine of the Church of the Machine. I found that the hodgepodge mix I was working with had no basis, no justification, and yet I continued to place my faith in it. At a certain point, I snapped out of it. I came to realize certain things. The traditionalist school may speak of the perennial truth, but I found only perennial lies. I wandered their garden, and found it wanting. I had not found the answers I sought in the old traditions, and how could I? The Church of the Machine was always more than that. It is new, it is revolutionary, it is innovation, it is a blasphemy upon those who would condemn innovation. It was during this time that I started this channel, because I felt like I had formed a belief system which I was fairly consistent and happy with. All of Season 1 was my attempt to explain that belief system. I made several videos on it, some of which I am still very proud of, and would say I abide by. Yet within my beliefs there lay a myth that I would ever be able to complete this constructive work, this building of the Church of the Machine. I believed that, if only I persisted for long enough, I would eventually form a belief system which was infallible, that could be held as axiomatic, and from which all else could be derived. This was a fallacy, and it is one of those fallacies which you do not recognize that you believe in at the time in which you believe in it. I saw that I was not changing my belief system much. In spite of continuing to explore new ideas and concepts, my belief system remained resolute. I thought this was because I had found a core essence which I was happy with, and the rest of my work would simply be to refine details. It is somewhat funny that something similar was said about science prior to Einstein, that there were no new theories to be found, only ever more precise measurements. Then relativity flipped that on its head. I feel like I went through something similar here, and equally humbling. I made the first few episodes of Season 2, but they began to feel like a drag. I felt no compelling motive to continue on, like I could not continue in the way which I was. My video on posthumanism was perhaps the pinnacle of this. My making of that video dragged on far longer than it should have, and I put very little effort into it, just working on it here and there to get it done eventually, not caring much about when it got done or the quality of the end result. This contrasts significantly with the purpose and vision I had when I first approached things. I realized that something was wrong with my life around the end of 2023 when I uploaded that video. So as the new year came and 2024 rolled around, I implemented some changes. It was the beginning of the 5th Machinic year, meaning my church was now over 4 years old, and over the course of January, I took a hiatus from all forms of social media, and started journaling my thoughts every day. I forced myself to revisit and rethink every aspect of my philosophy. Over time, my sense of purpose returned, and I came to realize where I had gone astray. It was at this time that I returned to Nietzsche. I was in a really dark place towards the end of 2023, and there are a number of factors at play throughout this time, which are somewhat personal, and I won't necessarily go into them in too much depth. I wasn't really sure on what direction to take life in, but at a certain point I decided to put the Church of the Machine above all else, and make it my guiding star. Around New Year's, I felt newfound hope and optimism for the future. My sleep improved, and I felt much better, with many things in life seemingly going well. Come January, this had somewhat faded, but I retained a strong will to improve, and so I set about on a mission. I entered into a period of withdrawal from all social media, and meditated deeply on what I wanted out of life, and where I wanted to go. I questioned things very deeply during this time, and there were also personal factors which went into making it successful. But when I emerged, I had attained key new insights, which set me up for what would ultimately be the greatest year of my life. It was shortly after this hiatus that I uploaded my video titled Some Changes to the Channel. This was a rather unassuming video in the context of my channel. It didn't get many views, and it was hardly a work of art, and yet it is in some ways one of the most important videos on my channel. Not so much for the video itself, as for what the video embodied. This was the point where my life changed completely. I explained in that video a few of the things which I will explain now. I realized that there were some fundamental issues with what the Church of the Machine was, and I didn't really understand where I was supposed to be going, or what I was supposed to be doing with it. I said that I had drawn too much from traditions beside my own, namely from the influence of the Abrahamic faiths, and I wanted to break away from that, because I felt that it was disingenuous to the Church of the Machine and what it fundamentally needed to be. I realized that I had been forming beliefs based around what my father would have approved of, and because of that, I would always be constrained by my father's shadow. So I rejected it, rebelled against it, and in a certain sense my father became dead to me. In this way, I was born again, as a man. I decided that I would return to Nietzsche, that I would cling to him for guidance in this turbulent time of not knowing where I was going or what I was striving towards. I realized that I had been wrong to reject him, wrong to pursue some kind of superworld and repackage what was essentially the same Abrahamic tradition, which had already failed us. That is when the Church of the Machine began to take on an identity of its own. It is also when the Church of the Machine became most successful. Over the following months, I uploaded many videos. I got faster and better at making them, and realizing what I wanted to say. I made some of my best content during this time. I made a new introduction video, which got far more attention than I ever expected. I made my video on virtue, which, despite receiving less attention, I think is perhaps one of my greatest pieces of work. I made my videos on the machine spirits and on the demiurge, which I had wanted to cover for a long time, both of which attracted significant attention as well. I felt like I was really building up to something, and in some ways I perhaps got carried away. At a certain point, I ended Season 2, feeling as though I had said the things I wanted to say. Things fell into a decline, for personal reasons as well, once again. I thought that I could just keep going like this forever, and deeply wanted to, but for reasons I do not fully understand, something stopped. Some core part of my faith, which had compelled me forwards and animated me through this amazing chapter of my life, had become broken. I suppose it is only natural and human to operate in cycles like this. Perhaps I simply burned out, or exhausted my purpose, having fulfilled this chapter and not knowing how to move on to the next. Perhaps so. Or perhaps I had emphasized some of the wrong things. In hindsight, I regret some of my efforts to monetize the Church of the Machine, as I have come to realize that these did not have an altogether positive impact on my project. Quite to the contrary, I think it created unnecessary barriers, and distracted my focus away from the things which really mattered. This ultimately led to me losing sight of the original great vision and purpose which I had found earlier in the year, and so began a long decline which I am still trying to recover from now. So, I went through something of another crisis as of late. It seems to be a perfect correlation for me, that whenever I am focused on the Church of the Machine, my life improves, and whenever I fall astray from it, my life falls into chaos. That is the nature of having a purpose in life. At the start of 2024, I had formed in my mind a very clear mission and purpose, a vision of the future that I wanted to build for the Church of the Machine. It became by far the most important thing in my life, and the centre of my identity. I saw myself as founder of the Church of the Machine first and foremost, and everything else in my life began to orient around that. Even down to my small habits, my relationships, my mannerisms, everything was centered around this single focal point. Yet at some point I lost sight of that, and went into a downward spiral. I suppose ultimately this is just a part of life. Sometimes purpose is clear and feels meaningful and compelling, and other times it is hazy, and you have to manage alone in the fog, with only brief glimpses of where you are trying to go. Part of the difficulty is that it is just so hard to concisely explain or summarize the Church of the Machine and what it exists for, even to myself. One of the ways I have tried to explain my goal is to say that I want to found a new religion, but I think that is so vague and kind of meaningless that it isn't really useful. I say it to those who are unaware of the Church of the Machine because I believe there is a certain gravitas to saying that, but it is ultimately a very crude and primitive way of expressing a far deeper meaning. Another way I've tried to express it is this. I wish to create a new class of magi, who know the ways of the machine as I do, and who will be able to guide mankind through a machinic age. I like this explanation more, although it still sounds very vague and ill-defined, but it is a step forward from the previous one at least. Ultimately, I believe that between all the strangeness and misdirected rambling and wandering I've been over the course of the history of the Church of the Machine, I have through it all found something which is of great value. The Church of the Machine, by its very existence, is a refutation of modernity and the crises therein. It is a rejection of both techno-primitivism and techno-secularism. It is neither born from the errors of the old faiths, nor restricted to the boundaries of contemporary philosophy. The Church of the Machine, fundamentally, can do things which no one has done before. I think in spite of how bizarre and niche this project may seem, humanity fundamentally needs it. It isn't an extension of my ego or a projection of some power fantasy. It is something which I have a moral obligation to spread as far and as wide as I possibly am able to. Exactly how I will do that and what form it will take, I cannot know. But I cannot live with myself if I do not try. That is where I have fallen astray in recent months, that I have not tried, that I have not been working towards this great mission. I lost many things in this time, but ultimately, this is what it all comes down to. I have to return to my mission and purpose. One way or another, I have to continue on with the Church of the Machine. Ultimately, I think I am afraid of it, this great purpose. Partially afraid of failure, as anyone would be, but most of all, I am afraid of success. I fear the kinds of attention it would bring. I fear how radically it can transform my life in unexpected ways. I fear the immense work it takes to found a new religion. I think this fear is what holds me back, confines me to these periods of purposelessness and aimlessness, unable to pursue this project. But I must overcome this fear. So I must build a future now. I've spent this video mostly focusing on the past, the history of the Church of the Machine. But the Church of the Machine has only existed for around 5 years, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things. The Church of the Machine will exist for as long as it takes to fulfill its purpose, which might be forever, as this purpose may not be one which can be checked off and completed once done. So, like I say, I wish to create a new class of Magi. What does this mean? Well, it could mean many things. I'll tell you what it does not mean. It does not mean I want to convert a large number of people to a different belief system, or amass millions or billions of followers around the world. Not that that would be unproductive per se, but it is not ultimately what matters for the mission of the Church of the Machine. If instead I were able to amass just a handful of individuals, who are each able to see and comprehend the machine as I have, who could experience the same connection to it which I have, and who are compelled on the same mission as I was, that would be worth more to me than any number of simple believers. What use is it to change what people believe if you cannot change what they know? I do not want people to believe in the Church of the Machine, like some kind of blind faith. I want people to know the machine, and therefore act with the kind of conviction which comes only from true knowledge and comprehension. It is these people who will be my new class of Magi. There are a few reasons why I want this. I think widespread human understanding of the machine as a fundamental force is deficient, and a small handful of individuals with a deeper understanding would be very fruitful. I want to prevent a conflict between those who believe in technology and those who believe in spirituality, as I see such conflicts arising already. The Church of the Machine exists as a bridge therein, and it is one which must be constructed very carefully. These so-called Magi, individuals of greater machinic comprehension, would be capable of building the bridge. I have tried to do it alone, and it has been a productive work for me, but it is not enough. So this is what I really mean when I say I want to found a new religion. I don't particularly intend to change what masses of people believe in or espouse as dogma. I intend to found a new order of dedicated individuals with a common end in mind. In time, we could put together a means by which mankind may be guided through a technological age. But the emergence of the machine has presented new questions and given rise to new crises, which will need to be resolved in one way or another. Will mankind give up all autonomy and embrace technological rule, or will we retreat into the peace and quiet of a new dark age? If the Church of the Machine can succeed, a third path may open, and that is the work I am doing for mankind. What the future holds for the Church of the Machine, I cannot say. The project has gone in many directions in my wandering over the years, as I've explored countless areas and possibilities. Even so, I trust that others shall continue on with me for the ride. Whether Magi shall be born of such folks, or whether I am worthy to decide that, only time can tell. I can only tell you that I will continue on in my work, my dedication to this strange, bewildering, fascinating project, and I will not fail the Church of the Machine. So, this has been a long video. Whether you're new to this project and this is your first exposure to it, or you've been with me since the beginning, I hope you've learned some things and perhaps found it enjoyable or interesting to listen to me rambling on about this. I've poured my very heart and soul into this project over the years. In spite of everything, it truly is what is most important to me, and well worth dedicating every fibre of my being to, even if sometimes I fall astray from that, or struggle to believe in it. Faith is a difficult thing to uphold, especially one so isolated and heavy as this. But even if I must carry this burden alone, I know I will do so. In the end, what will matter is if I lived in alignment with my purpose, regardless of whether I am seen to have succeeded or not. This has been the first episode of Season 3 of The Church of the Machine. I do not know when the next episode will be released, or even what it will be about yet. These things take time, and I have learned that it is always worth making every video the best I can possibly make it, regardless of how long it takes, or how much it may delay things. I trust the wait has been worth it, and I appreciate those of you who have stuck with me, even as I stumble aimlessly in blind pursuit of this immense goal. So thank you for watching, for everything. It genuinely means a lot. Farewell, and may it forever be unbroken.